Oh no, not me returning to YouTube again after a month of a hiatus and pretending like nothing just happened. So let's get into it. Basically, there are two main reasons why I have been gone for a while. I'll get into reason number one right up front, and I'll save reason number two towards the end because it's kind of a little bit long-winded and it's a lot of factors. However, nothing bad. So I just want you guys to know that nothing bad. Actually, pretty much all good is why I've been gone. But reason number one is, first off, I know I make jokes occasionally, right, about, me talking about certain topics and saying, I love my life. If anything happens to me, just know that I had no reason for things to happen to me, right? I'll say jokes like that, or I'll say this is definitely going to get the channel shadow banned. This time I'm like 10,000% serious. I believe it on this one, like no jokes aside. So I really implore you, I ask, I beckon you this time for real, please like this video, please share this video, and even more importantly, comment. The reason why I say comment is because I've collected a lot of data points about this particular topic, but I do still feel there are disconnects in it, maybe things that I couldn't find or didn't think a creative route to find the information. And there is still little bits of disconnects, and I don't want you to jump to any conclusions. I'm literally just presenting a topic to you that I think is definitely worthy of a little bit of critical thinking. So without further ado, let us get into Lifelog. In 2003, DARPA put in a bid for a project that they wanted to get created and funding for. This particular project was considered an ontology of a bunch of subsystems, and these subsystems would be data points of a particular person's life. These type of data points would include anything such as phone calls, the conversations of the phone calls, biometrics such as fingerprints, heart rate, sleep patterns. I hope you're starting to catch on to what I'm getting to. If not, no worries, we're gonna get there. But emails, snail mail, interactions with people, relationships, photos, videos, just about anything, you name it. And that would be the entire point of this, was to try to collect as many threads of a person's life as possible and be able to actually document them and have them in a database. Not only that, I could even get deeper and further. And I want to reiterate, this is the year 2003, by the way, because when I say a lot of this now in 2022, I mean, it seems pretty mundane, right? Having your phone calls, logged, right? Having your emails, text messages logged. Like, it sounds mundane, but I want you to really put yourself in the mindset of 2003 when we think about this, okay? But it didn't stop there. We're talking about tracking your location with GPS, even down to breaths taken. Don't really know how, but they were trying to log that. And so much more, like anything you could think of. Steps taken, location, like I mentioned. I mean, breaths taken, like that's even deeper than, this typical heartbeat. But nevertheless, they were trying to get all of these data points. Not only this, but they were also trying to put a predictive element into it as well. So it wasn't just being reactive to whatever you were doing and just logging it. It was actually getting into heuristics almost to just predict ahead of time. Like, oh, you usually go to this coffee shop on Mondays and Tuesdays. Let's preemptively log it, and if you don't go, then we'll just scratch it off, and we'll store that in the database and figure out why you didn't go this particular, Monday, May the 27th or whatever, and figure out if there's a certain pattern or behavior in that. It was getting that deep. So, believe it or not, the same sentiment we have today is how people had back then. And whenever this story kind of hit the media, it eventually started getting criticisms, and they quoted it as the diary to end all diaries. Because once you were set up in something like Lifelog, I mean, what else would you need to track if all of this other information was being tracked for you? You could just almost recall anything just from the data being provided. It has the phone call conversation. It has the text messages. It's been listening the entire time. It probably has a better recollection of a day than you do. So, diary of all diaries. So in the early stages of the Lifelog program, the participants, users, volunteers, whatever you want to call them, they would basically be strapped up. So they would have like, oh, it's kind of funny to look back now, but they would have like cameras like strapped like on their chest, and they would have all of these other sensors and things that would basically log them in this experiment early on, just to see how effective the logging and the sensing was. So it's very funny. You can find some of these pictures online of how they were just suited and booted up. But what is very interesting to me is that, and trust me, by the way, keep this in your mind because this will definitely spiral into the rest of this video. The software that they were using for Lifelog was basically considered open source, as in you yourself could have gotten it at the time. Since this particular project wasn't actually top secret, it was public. Remember I said early on, the media already got a hold of the knowledge of this. It was public. It just wasn't talked about much in the media, which is also interesting. I tell people this all the time. Side note, don't just go with the headlines, because crazy stuff happens all the time in the world that may not get highlighted in the news. So sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper for some of the interesting stories. I mean, put it in this perspective. There's 7, almost 8 billion of us on this planet, and I guarantee you the most interesting thing in the world right now is not the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case. Guarantee you. So just put that into perspective whenever you look at some of these cases. This took place in 2003. I don't know what was popping at that time. I can't remember. I was like 12 or 13, but yeah. So also, another quick side note and fun fact, DARPA actually played a very key important role in creating GPS itself. So do with that information as you wish. Another thing that made this topic somewhat controversial is because at the same exact time, DARPA was working on a separate project, and this separate project was an intelligence type program. And I think it was built on maybe similar systems, but different for different purposes. And the purposes of this separate program was to track, monitor, and spy on people that are potentially terroristic threats. So people started doing this combination and kind of merging the two projects. So this is also another reason why Lifelog was basically looked at as very negative at its time, because people just assumed that this was a merger of things for people to just get spied on and get their privacy eroded over time and potentially be targeted for, you know, who knows what. A subjective move. You know, in today's age, some people could argue that, you know, just making certain tweets, you could potentially be a terrorist. Disrupting the status quo, you could potentially be a terrorist. So at the time, the two separate projects merged in the media, and people really were like, yo, what are you doing? However, DARPA came out and said, no. See, the reason why it's different is because the other program we're working on, we're just going to do that one regardless. If we want to spy on you because we feel that you may be a threat, it's going to happen. Lifelog is different because you can opt in or out of this at any given moment. You don't have to share your data with us. You just choose to. Also note that, because I'm telling you, this is all bubbling up to something of a revelation later on. So keep that in mind as well. Now, what I think is probably the most interesting is the overarching reason why this whole Lifelog project was created by DARPA. So, in their own words, when they wanted to create all of this, it was for the sole purpose of logging a soldier's life. They wanted to find a way to where they could take all of these data points about individual soldiers, and they could report this data upwards to, I don't really know how the military works. I guess commander, general, lieutenant, sergeant, whoever like controls soldiers at a higher level. I don't know. someone in the military probably knows better than me. Sorry. But the point was to take these soldiers and basically just bubble all of the information about who they are as an individual, so their commanding officer would have a better way to figure out how to command and connect with their soldiers. That is DARPA's whole main objective, overarching thing for collecting all of these data points. I keep reiterating this because it's going to get weird in a moment about intentions. So this is where we get into the good part. Skepticism. So defense analyst John Pike of Global Security mentioned, well, that's a good reason and that's cool and whatnot. However, I find it strange that to this day, there still hasn't been any practical usage of this in the military. And you said straight up that that was the purpose of this. So why is it that the military still hasn't used any of this software or any of the intelligence points or things that they came up with? He argued that this actually makes a lot more sense for this to be surveillance-based software rather than trying to actually have a true productive nature with connecting and being more efficient in the military. With all of these data points being taken, such as, breaths taken, steps, GPS, sleep patterns, text messages, conversations, emails, phone calls, relationships with people, he argued that this makes a lot more sense for this software to be Big Brother related rather than it being something for practical military usage. Stephen Aftergood, who is another data analyst with the Federation of American Scientists, basically said that this is overkill. He said with all of these data points, it would be completely overkill to log a soldier's life this particular amount. He said it's so much data that it's like disturbingly specific, and just to do, commands and have a better relationship, it's like, why don't you just, sit down with them and have a beer or something? If you really care to connect with your soldiers that much, at this point with all of these data points, it's getting like Metal Gear Solid-ish. You know what I mean? At this point, you might as well just inject nanomachines into somebody's veins and just keep up with them. Like, it's that granular. So he basically said this is just overkill. James X. Dempsey from the Center of Democracy and Technology said that his greatest fear is that users still wouldn't have too much control or access to their own data. He said that the issue is, although you may be able to store this data, and funny enough, again, I can't say this enough, this happened in 2003, but everything I'm saying to you is just, it's things that people warned about in 2003 before all of these things happened afterwards that spiraled into what we have today. I just want to throw that out there. I can't stress this enough. But he said that the issue is there's no stopping other people from figuring out or taking this information and possibly using it for nefarious reasons. Even so much as, if I was to take all these data points on you, it still doesn't even stop the US government from coming in and having a subpoena that would make me have to relinquish this information to you anyway. So regardless of saying that it's not a Big Brother or surveillance kind of thing, could almost be debunked with that statement alone. Which is, like I said before, you're going to get into a lot of gray area with this topic, and that's what makes it so interesting and weird. Because, like they said, these people can have all of the good intentions they want. DARPA can have all of these great intentions, but it doesn't matter. If these people want to figure out the last time you farted, they can figure it out. Jan Walker stated that DARPA had no intentions to merge or connect multiple Lifelogs together. And by the way, I want you to understand what she means by multiple Lifelogs. It's basically a profile of a person, so multiple profiles. But she said they had no intentions to merge or connect them, which also I think is BS, because the whole point was they also tracked relations, right? Or relationships. So in a way, if they track relationships, I think that's loosely or indirectly also connecting people. Do you see how this gets so murky? It's weird. But she said they had no plans to do it initially. However, you could take the data and you could merge people and get this, potentially predict an epidemic. Wow, look at that. And like that, demonetized. Anyways, so moving on to the next part. Also, I think it's very important to know that a lot of this information that I found was kind of difficult. It's very difficult, actually, because a lot of this information that I kind of dug up for that particular skepticism part, that came from like literally 2003, 2004. And I had to use the Wayback Machine to find some old websites that basically don't exist anymore. So a lot of this information is scarce, and even at the time it was somewhat scarce because of how much skepticism and criticism that it garnered in such a fast time in the public eye. This may be why you never heard of it, is because it was in and out really quickly. So quickly that the whole project for Lifelog lasted roughly about a year before they basically shut it down. Now, with that being said, because of that, it's scarce information also because most people just assumed it was defunct and abandoned by then. So with all of the growing criticism and skepticism, in 2004, Lifelog was canned. They basically shut it down because of how big the criticism was in the public eye over the project. Nobody wanted to be spied on. Can you believe that? That's crazy. And here we are in 2022. According to everything I've said so far, the people who created Lifelog initially, they had good intentions. One of the main people was Douglas Gage, and he said himself he was very confused with all of the criticism and skepticism that he received over the project because in his mind, he was doing something good. He was trying to collect these data points for military soldiers to have a more efficient and effective military. He thought it would be very beneficial towards mankind to be able to predict and read people in such a way that we could get people to operate more efficiently. So, with all these good intentions and with all of what happened and the project basically going sour and getting canceled, what ended up happening? The reason why this has gotten so weird and so freaky is because February 3rd, 2004, Lifelog was officially canceled, defunct, terminated, party's over. The very next day, Facebook basically became a company. So, man, yeah, people got kind of weirded out about that a little bit. Now, this is where it just really starts breaking my brain in half because it mixed a lot of emotions for me. And even researching this, I had certain initial thoughts. I'll be honest with you. So if you look at this channel and you go to the past, you'll see that we've done podcasts. I don't remember what episode it was, but I told you before, we had some crazy, stupid, funny, hot takes on some of the episodes, right? And I don't remember what the segment was or how we got into it, but I distinctly remember some reason we said, if there was a famous or rich person that you could fight or punch in the face, who would it be? If I recall, I think mine was Mark Zuckerberg. And I talked a lot about the manipulation, the spying, the surveillance, and the espionage overall that Facebook has done. And I've even thought about doing a mega video on it. Tell me how you feel in the comments below, because there's so many things that have happened to Facebook over the years that I feel like enough people don't talk about, such as the psychological experiment, but there's so much more. So if you want to see that, let me know in the comments below. I'll make sure to put a video like that together and get it out to you guys eventually. But the more I dug into this particular subject, the less angry I got with Mark Zuckerberg about the app, because the more I started looking back and zooming out and kind of looking at the thing as a whole, I realized this may be a man who's not in control of this company at all. He could be a figurehead for all we know. And I'm going to get into a little bit about that, because So far, what I've told you, it could just be very shallow coincidences, right? Okay, Lifelog shuts down this day, and the very next day, Facebook goes up. That could just be merely a coincidence, right? So Douglas Gage, who I said earlier was like the initial person that thought of the Lifelog project, who worked for DARPA and pitched it, even he said he wouldn't be a bit shocked that although he had good intentions and it was supposed to benefit mankind and make a more efficient military and possibly society, he wouldn't be a bit surprised if other branches of the government did want to use technology, software, and data like this for egregious or nefarious reasons. The person who literally created Lifelog said I wouldn't be a bit shocked if that ended up boiling down to it. Also, and this is probably the most telling thing, he even said straight up, if there was ever a successor to Lifelog, it probably would be Facebook. Of course, he can't confirm that. Of course, he wouldn't tell us that even if he knew that. So we just have to take his word that this would be just merely an assumption and him going out on a limb. But he did straight up say that in an interview that Facebook is probably the closest thing that he could see Lifelog evolving into after it was terminated. He went so far to say that and make that claim that he even said, although he has a Facebook, he makes sure that he puts as minimal amount of data points on it as possible. I think even going so far as saying he literally only has the app when he wants to use it really quickly, and then he scrubs his phone and devices of all traces of it. And when he gets on Facebook, he doesn't like anything. He literally just gets on there, views his close friends and family, and gets back off. He doesn't like, he doesn't comment, he doesn't do any of like I forgot what it's called, but you know, whenever you get like a third party app and you try to link them, he doesn't do any of that. He just gets on there, looks at a few people, good, they're still alive, logs out, scrubs his phone from the app, all the data, everything he possibly can, all the cookies, and gets right back off. So that should tell you how much caution even he has with something like this, even though technically he's the initial founder of this thought process. So that's a little bit negative towards Facebook, that like the original OG is like, I don't know about the book of faces. But of course it gets deeper than this. So although the project was scrapped, and like I mentioned before, it's very difficult to find traces of people who may have worked on Lifelog and somehow rolled into Facebook. But believe it or not, there are people who worked on both projects or in different branches of the government and have made their way to work at Facebook. Now, early on, I just want to preface this. It's not uncommon to see people do things like this, okay? So I just want to say that as well for you. For example, at the current company I work at, which is a cybersecurity company, I won't say any names, but I will say this. There is a guy who, at my cybersecurity company, previously worked at NASA. So it's not uncommon to see people in branches of the government, go different routes, because at the end of the day, if you have a skill set, and this is why skills are so important, such as coding, programming, different things like this. It's important because these skills are somewhat transferable and you can just go to different industries, different jobs, and still use those same skills. So I do want to say, just because these people worked at DARPA or worked at CIA may not necessarily mean that they were trying to, just be puppets of the CIA. Although I will say, once you work for the CIA, I kind of think it's like the mafia. You always work for the CIA. You know too much. How could you just get thrown into the wall? Anywho, I digress, enough rambling. There are at least 3 people I want to talk to you about. However, there are more people that were involved in the government and also in Facebook. So let's get into these people. Max Kelly was the chief security officer at Facebook at one point in time. Also, it is important to know that he actually worked for the NSA and I believe Cybersecurity Command or something like that. So this guy definitely knows about security, privacy, and surveillance, because NSA. But it's very interesting to know this. What I also find interesting is now he owns his own company called Redacted. And it's when I was literally looking up the company, I didn't know it was literally called Redacted. So I kept seeing Redacted and I was like, what is it called? Why won't they tell me? Like, what is it called? Why does it just keep saying Redacted? It's called Redacted. That's the name of his company. Also, equally as important and kind of weird, I don't know, maybe it's protocol or not. I don't know. You tell me. But whenever he left Facebook, for some reason, they kept it secret for like 3 years. I don't know. It's kind of weird. But yeah, they wouldn't leak out that this guy no longer worked at Facebook, and they just kind of kept up a facade for 3 years about that. But Regina Dugan worked at DARPA in 1996 and stayed there for quite some time, even working her way up to be director. And the director position at DARPA actually oversees most projects, which means that she probably also oversaw and helped with the approval of Lifelog initially. She also led strategic initiatives in the field of social media. And after her time at DARPA, she went on to work at not only Facebook, but also Google. Most importantly, when she worked at Facebook, she worked at what is called Building 8, which I have never heard of until this project, but apparently there is a special site for Facebook's company called Building 8. And what they do at Building 8 is they work on top secret and somewhat weird and obtuse projects in the background of Facebook before they're initially rolled out and presented and implemented into the actual software or the company or business model or strategy. So she was in it. I'll just say that. She was in some stuff. And last but not least, this is probably one of the most definitive people. And if you've ever watched the movie Social Network, you know this guy because he's a big part in the movie. And even funny enough, when I explain this to you, I'm looking at the notes right now. When I explain this to you, I really want you to go YouTube this scene. YouTube Sean Parker meeting Mark Zuckerberg Social Network movie, something along those lines. It's a scene whenever Justin Timberlake, because that's who plays him, walks into like this restaurant. That's the scene. I want you to take what I'm about to tell you and go back to that scene and just think about this. Think really hard, because to me, this is probably one of the most that's hard to kind of deny this at this point kind of things. So brace yourself. Sean Parker is a very interesting fellow. He is considered to be an autodidactismist, which basically means you are a self-learner. You will pick up a bunch of different things, a bunch of different skills without really any type of schooling, formal education, or anything like that. And you just go. You just learn and go. Well, one of the things that he decided to learn was coding and programming. Because of his impressive coding skills, Sean went on to be the first president of Facebook under Mark Zuckerberg. Also very important, note that. And also a side note, I thought this was kind of crazy. By Sean's senior year of high school, he was already making about $80,000 a year from various side projects that he was picking up doing coding. Now, I don't really know who he was doing coding for, but I want to let you know the significance of the timing of these events that I'm about to say. Keep in mind, he was doing this his senior year of high school. So he was probably 17, maybe 18. The reason why I'm asking you to really hone in on these ages and times is because I'm about to throw some things at you that say, wait a minute, if that happened then and then you're keep up with me. Backtrack with me a little bit to when Sean was 16 though. I know I'm taking you all over 18, 16, 25, yada, 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 but just follow me. I'm just breadcrumbs, you put the pieces together, okay? When he was 16, he actually entered a science fair. And at this particular science fair, he put a project in for basically coding. It was a coding project that he came up with to enter a contest at the science fair. And it was for a web crawler. Basically what a web crawler is, in the most layman's terms possible, is it is a script of code that you can create, and it can basically just kind of rummage through the internet, and it will look for whatever kind of data points it tells you to look for, keywords, searches, so have you. And you can just find all of this type of data just by typing in or configuring it to what you want it to look for, and it'll do it automatically on its own for you. You set it out into the wild, it goes and gets the data, brings it back to you, and you didn't have to do any of the real manual labor yourself. So he basically won that science fair project, contest or whatever, because of the creation of this web crawler. Now, if I remember correctly, don't nail me on this, but this happened, I think, the late 90s. So before Lifelog in 2003, obviously. So he was like 16 at some point in the 90s when he won this. This is very important because of what I'm about to say next. Sean Parker was immediately recruited by the CIA because he created that web crawler. They were very impressed with his work at the time. 16 years old and you're already able to make information like that to just collect data points. Scoop this kid up. Now, the reason why these points are so important is because what I realized they didn't really highlight in the movie. If you ever look up Sean Parker, he's known as the guy who was over or created or founded Napster. No one ever mentions that this dude was already working for the CIA. Why does nobody mention that this guy was already working for the CIA at the age of 16? So whenever you look at that scene that I told you to look at in the movie, Sean Parker was already like 25 years old. Now, whether he was still involved with the CIA at that point, who knows? And again, like I said before, it's like the mafia. Once you're in, you're kind of in. You may not do active jobs, but you know too much information, bro. So I can't ever let you completely break that leash. You gotta still be tied to the CIA somehow. So this is a lot to take in. I'm not even sure necessarily that, Mark may have known at the time that he could be potentially talking to a CIA agent, and the CIA agent was injecting himself into Mark Zuckerberg's company. This is what I meant earlier when I said it's a lot of gray area in the subject, because you can't fully connect all of these dots. I'm pretty sure whoever has all of this information is either still on payroll or in the dirt. So when I say this, I mean, seriously, guys, this is a lot of information. And just to kind of wrap it up, I'm basically done looking at my notes now. Just to kind of wrap all of this up, like I said, don't jump to any conclusions and immediately say, all of social media is run by the government, because realistically, you can't prove it. And like I said, if you can prove it, you probably won't live long. But it's very important because it's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. It's almost like the puzzle's almost complete, but there's still too many pieces in the middle to make out, that's actually a dog right there. If that made sense. But Sean, he made Napster, worked with Napster or whatever, but he also probably made a lot of that money from the government. Like I said, by the time he was 17 or 18, he was making like $80K a year, which also, fun fact, I don't know why I did it, but I took that number and decided to adjust inflation. So the $80,000 a year he was making like in the 90s or whatever, equivalent to today's, or adjusted to today's inflation, would be, I think, about $147,000 a year. So imagine just making that kind of money at that age right now, working for the government. Listen, a lot of kids would jump on that, and I couldn't blame them. And the weird, crazy part about it is, at that age, although Sean was extremely intelligent, he's still a kid. He's still very naive. And you could kind of get him to do any kind of, coding or project you want to. And if you can make it sound the right way, you can make it agreeable. I mean, think about it. This whole project altogether was something that, Douglas Gage had pure intentions, so he says, to just kind of make the world a better place, make a more efficient military, and who knows what kind of long-term goals he was looking for. Was he looking for ways to try to alleviate or possibly fix PTSD from soldiers? Potentially. Who knows what could have spiraled out of that if it was done in a positive light. However, it wasn't. And what also makes it very gray and blurry of an area is, remember what I said earlier, right? This was a public open project, Lifelog. So who's to say that the remnants of it couldn't be, birthed into something else? Like I mentioned in a few videos in the past with another DARPA project, whenever they were working on Project Kalo for the perfect AI assistant, that software was made public and open source as well. And what did we get out of it? We got Siri, we got Bixby, and we got a few other AIs that are companion AIs as well. So who's to say that some of the remnants of Lifelog's processes didn't turn into Facebook, didn't turn into Twitter, didn't turn into Instagram, Snapchat, or whatever else? And that's where it gets very gray of an area, because we can't really prove it. However, we can see that some of the people who were attached to some of these projects and government branches are still effectively doing some of the same things in some of the same circles today. But like I said before, we'll never get to the bottom of that. We'll never figure out if these people were purposely trying to continue Lifelog outside of Lifelog into other branches as well. So I think it's interesting altogether. I didn't know all of these facts about Sean. I had no clue that he was, in the CIA at the age of 16. So I'm not going to figure out when he started and stopped working for the CIA, if he went back, what have you, right? Now, at this point, maybe he's out. Maybe he's just trying to live out his days and, possibly think about all the software and espionage he could have made them software. I don't know. But I just think it's a very interesting conversation. I didn't know all of this information. Again, I'm not making any claims necessarily that DARPA had anything to do with Facebook. I think that's where it gets so blurry because, like I said before, a lot of the software was like open source, right? So anybody could grab it. It could be a weird thing to where some people in the government saw Facebook as an opportunity, jumped on Facebook, and all we know, Mark Zuckerberg could have had this company hijacked from him at the very beginning. It's very funny because, like I said before, I really didn't like Mark Zuckerberg. I don't like the way that Facebook operates sometimes. But the more I zoom out and the more I look at it, Facebook does seem very typical of the type of surveillance and espionage that I may expect from the government. So when I look at it from an individual standpoint and I look at it at Mark Zuckerberg, I would say, why are you making these decisions? Why do you think you need to log people in this manner? Why do you think you need to run these type of psychological experiments on people? But when I look at it from the government standpoint, I'm like, yeah, you would do that. Like, this is why we don't trust you, government. Like, look, people want to trust you, but you just make it extremely difficult to trust you. So when I look at it from that standpoint, it makes a lot more sense. But at the same time, I can't officially give a verdict and say that that's the case because there's still little pieces in between some of these points that I mentioned to you that I just can't hard call or hard make a decision on because I feel like I would be almost, going too far out on a limb. And that's where you kind of enter the tinfoil hat territory. So with all that being said, now let me get into the second reason why I haven't really posted in a while. And it's a little long-winded, so I'll try not to keep you too long. If you want to cut off right here, just please drop a like first. Anyways, maybe a sub also, if you haven't yet. Anywho, but like I said before, it's nothing bad, right? But I'll be honest with you. One thing is I did get a new vehicle. Hooray me. My other vehicle, I've tried to hold on to it for years and I still have it, but it's just getting not functional. Like right now, it's like 103 degrees outside here where I'm at. It's crazy. And my older vehicle, like the AC no longer really works, and it basically breaks down every single year. So in short, I just been riding around having a good time on the weekend. Okay. It's fun to have AC again. That's cool. But other reasons as well is, shouts out to Trollzer. He mentioned it a while back, and he said, maybe you should take a break, just kind of chill out for a bit. And at first I was like, no. But then I was like, I don't know. So that's also what I did too. It was kind of a perfect timing thing. I just got my new vehicle, and I was like, why not take a break now and just kind of chill out for a couple of weeks? Also, my job's been pretty crazy, been pretty hectic. There's some new people. I've been training them like crazy, and I've been covering multiple territories. So, it's been a crazy time for you, boy. Again, though, like I said, nothing bad. It's just I've been super busy in certain aspects. I've been chilling in other aspects. And the third reason of this two-part reason, it's like 2.C, whatever. There was a video Jake Tran posted. I think Jake Tran can make some pretty cool videos from time to time, so I'll check in. But one video he talked about he believes that he does so well is because he tackles subjects that people don't really hear often. And he said he plays in a space where nobody's really at, which is smart, and it's kind of capitalism. You play in spaces where people aren't, and you try to make your own, niche, make your own pond, which my whole idea on capitalism has also morphed a little recently. But that was a thought I had. If you notice in the last video right before this, what did I tell you? I said the next video is going to be on Spring Hill Jack, right? And because of hearing this about Jake Tran saying, he's trying to stand out and make different content, which is something I have thought about, and you can see it in my videos beforehand, talking about Project Kalo. I'm going to be talking about the Gateway experience a little bit more. Unfortunately, I see people are getting into that topic now. I feel like I waited too long. I'm kind of sad, but probably still going to cover it. But I didn't do the Spring Hill Jack video because I was like, you know what? If you see me, you've probably seen Spring Hill Jack. There's nothing new that I can add to Spring Hill Jack. There's nothing new that I can really talk about. Why am I wasting your time talking about something you've probably already heard? Sure, I get it. Some people like hearing a certain person talk about it, but why don't I hit you with both? Why don't I talk about it and you like hearing me talk about it, which if you do, thank you. But please share me with other people. Can't stress that enough. Please help. But why not also talk to you about something that I feel like you may not have ever heard? Why not shed light on something new that you may not have ever heard? Still, it's blowing my mind that Sean Parker has been working for the CIA since he was 16, and all people want to say is Napster, Napster, Napster. Oh my God, no, this is way crazier that he's been working for the CIA since he was 16. I didn't even know you could recruit people that young to the CIA. That's crazy. So why not hit you with subjects that are a little bit deeper? And I say it every video, but I really want you guys to jump in the comments and discuss these topics amongst yourselves. If I missed something, if there's something else you know on this topic, throw it in the comments. I want to know too. Also, and this is a very important heads up as well, going on with the future of this channel. Another thing is, since I'm going to be trying to get into subjects that are a little bit deeper and a little bit more different, one thing that I do to kind of filter this information out is, believe it or not, I actually use YouTube as a reference sometimes. And I gauge how spicy the video is going to be on basically hits. If I type in a certain subject and I don't really see too many people talking about it, or I see no one talking about it, I feel good and bad, because on one end I'm like, good, I'm gonna bring them something somewhat new or something that they may not know much of, or most people may not know much of. But at the same time, I'm like, man, now it's making it a little bit more difficult for me to actually find stuff to reference off of and have leads to get more information. But nevertheless, the point I'm bringing this up for is I'm not going to be doing videos every week like I used to. So that's kind of the downside, right? I thought about still doing videos like Spring Hill Jack, like filler videos just to please the algorithm gods, but I'm really going to entrust that you guys can just carry the algorithm. Hopefully you like this content. Hopefully you like, share, and comment. I would like to keep finding weirdo stuff like this. I want you guys to discuss it in the comments section. How much influence do you think the government had on Facebook? Nowadays, it's pretty evident that there's influence, but do you think it was under the guise of this the whole time? Do you think that Mark Zuckerberg has secretly been finessed in his own company and now he's merely just a figurehead and a puppet? It's funny because when I look at him in these videos now, like the awkward video of him drinking the water, we make jokes about that, right? Like he's a robot, he's a lizard person. But now when I look at it, I'm like, maybe he's a guy that's scared to get a bullet in the back of his head. That makes a lot more sense now when, they're telling him to answer these questions. And when you look at it, he's almost surrounded because he's going up front to this judge who's probably already in on it. His whole team is probably already heavily invested or heavily deep connected to the CIA or the NSA or other forms of government. And you're just looking at a man who has all of these billions of dollars, but it's money that's almost like shut up money at this point. Don't let people know what's actually going on in the kitchen. Now, this could all be a stretch. It could all be a reach. You tell me. I don't know. That's what this discussion is about. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. I will see you in a couple other weeks. I think we're going to do conspiracy theory iceberg. I think that's going to be the next one. Who knows? We'll see. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope I shared some new information for you, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the very near future. Have a fantastical day.